Good evening, and welcome to Gateway's online Good Friday service. We hope this is a time of remembrance and reflection for you. Please enter into a posture of worship as we join in singing.
Suffering I do dream.
work I do see.
Late on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples. He tried to wake them so that they could pray with him. While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns." It's late at night. The disciples are sleeping. Jesus is praying. A mob leaves Jerusalem through the east gate near the temple. They wind their way down and up through the Kidron Valley, carrying torches. The valley is deep. Jerusalem is on one side. The Garden of Gethsemane is on the other side, halfway up the Mount of Olives. Jesus can see them coming, but he doesn't run. He knows what's coming. He's known it for a long time. Judas leads the mob. Judas, one of the disciples, leads the mob. Judas, who has seen Jesus do amazing things, miraculous things, leads the mob. Judas, who has seen the heart of God with skin on, up close and personal. The next time you grow frustrated that God won't move and you wonder why, and you say to yourself, "I could really believe if you just come through for me," remember, it takes more than the miraculous to give birth to saving faith. Judas betrays Jesus with a kiss. Now, the disciples want to meet violence with violence, but that's never the way, not for God. Then, seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, but when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him," but he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. And later someone else saw him and said, "You're also one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, but he's a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him: "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. 2 years ago, when we were in Israel, we were approaching the high priest's house. A rooster crowed. I kid you not. I actually felt a pang. Jesus was led into Jerusalem. This wasn't a short walk. Did they rough him up a bit? Certainly he was very tired. He hadn't slept. And they led him to Caiaphas' place. He was the high priest. "High priest, your honor, O great rabbi, meet Son of God." Think of the power disparity in that moment. Think about where the power was perceived to lie versus where it really lay. Peter follows behind. He's the only one we get a real report on, I imagine because this was a very, very memorable event for him. Now, Peter has a Galilean accent, plus he's pretty much at Jesus' side throughout the previous years, especially during the preceding week in Jerusalem. It's very cool outside, and there's a fire in the courtyard near Caiaphas' house. Peter warms himself, and 3 times he's recognized. 3 times he denies knowing Jesus exactly as Jesus predicted he would, exactly. Then a rooster crows, and Peter knows. If he had any doubts, he knows now. He knows what kind of man he is, what kind of character he has. He knows who he really is apart from God's intervention. But that would come later. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking him and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, "Prophesy, who hit you?" and they said many blasphemous things to him. How bold is Luke? I mean, they've been accusing Jesus of blasphemy for months, but now Luke turns the tables and plainly tells us what he's been teasing through this whole account. You want to know what real blasphemy is? It's refusing to recognize this man, Jesus. You're mocking God the Son. Careful what you do. One day you will know. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. If you're the Christ, they said, tell us. Jesus answered, if I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I asked you, you wouldn't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God. They all asked, are you then the Son of God? He replied, you're right in saying I am. Then they said, why do we need any more testimony? We've heard it from his own lips. I had a friend one time who was in a state mental health facility. His name was Richie. When I visited him, Richie told me there were 2 people in his ward who believed they were God. Jesus may be a lunatic, but if he wasn't, if he had spoken the truth, if he was who he said he was, think about the implications of this exchange. Think about the audacity of the religious leaders here. Absolutely certain that they were right. Ludicrous. This is a drop of water claiming supremacy over the ocean. This is a candle yelling at the sun. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, we have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Christ a king. Can somebody get this man a good lawyer? This is utterly false. Of course, Rome doesn't care about blasphemy, so let's just plant some charges on his robe somewhere that he won't even suspect. I mean, just make some stuff up. So Pilate asked Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Yes, it is as you say, Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no basis for a charge against this man. But they insisted. He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teachings. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. On hearing this, Pilate asked if this man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he'd been wanting to see him. From what he'd heard about him, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answers. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressing him in an elegant robe, and they sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. Isn't it nice that Jesus can bring people together like this? It often surprises me in many of these encounters to see where the real action is. What do you think Pilate and Herod thought about this whole event? I mean, clearly, they are the center of the action here, right? In their minds. And they were witness to the single most important event in the history of the world. How did they see it? I'm convinced we so often miss it. The real action, I mean. We labor over deadlines. We drown ourselves in comparisons. We worry and fret over things that ultimately will be of very little consequence in God's kingdom. Usually, very little consequence in our own lives, ultimately. Really, isn't it our job to act faithfully and to let God take care of what matters and what doesn't? Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers of the people, and said to them, you brought this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us, as you can see. He's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him. So why punish him at all, Pilate, you stinking people pleaser? I know why. I recognize that sin pattern, that weak spine, get myself out of this somehow way of operating. Can you see the perfect storm that's brewing here? Can you see the circumstances lining up and pressing against Jesus, Father, why have you arranged such awful, inevitable circumstances surrounding and pressing in on your own Son? Oh yeah, because of me, because of my sin. With one voice they cried out, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas was thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time he spoke to them, "Why? What crime has this man committed? I found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. As they led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the barren women, the wombs that never bore, the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if men do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others, let him save himself if he's the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine, vinegar, and said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God?" he said, "since you're under the same sentence. We're punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Don't you want to know what this man knew and how he knew it? Had he heard Jesus preach? Had he seen him before? Had it moved him? Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. We call this Good Friday. How can you call this good? I want you to think of the law of gravity. The law of gravity suggests that any 2 pieces of matter anywhere in the universe are attracted to one another. That means that this nail and its small mass is attracted to the earth and its very, very large mass. So if I drop this nail, if I let go of this nail, because of the law of gravity, it hits the floor. The same is true for this light bulb. If I let go of this light bulb, it hits the floor. Except this time it'll be messy. Let's imagine that I give this light bulb a sense of self-consciousness and free will. and I love this light bulb very, very much. I want to keep it near me. Let's say the light bulb one day decides to roll out of my hand. It's going to fall, it's going to hit the floor, and it will be messy because of the law of gravity, no matter where we are in the universe. It's not because there's anything wrong with the floor. It's not because I hate the light bulb. It's the way the universe is designed. But what if I could take the place of the light bulb in its descent? What if I could satisfy the consequences of the law of gravity somehow? What if I can be a substitute so that I get destroyed while the light bulb gets restored? God assured us, explained to us, and warned us from the very, very beginning that sin results in death, in eternal separation from the source of life. This is the consequence toward which you and I are hurtling. God the Son became a man in order to take the place of the light bulb. Jesus died our death so that we could live in His life. Nothing could save us from the horrible consequences of our leap out of the Father's hand except the blood of the Son. And so He gave it. And that's good. That's very, very good.
Thank you again, Gateway, for being a part of this Good Friday service. If you haven't seen our Easter trail yet, please check it out on our property. It's going on all week. Tomorrow we've got 2 family services, or we'll see you Sunday morning at one of our 2 Easter services. We hope you enjoyed this time of reflection and remembrance. Go in peace.